When a cell eats a piece of glucose, something comes out in the back end. One of those things is called adenosine. Adenosine works its way through your system, goes to a very specific receptor site in your brain, and accumulates. As it accumulates, you get sleepier and sleepier and sleepier. Here's the weird thing. If you look at the molecular structure of adenosine and the molecular structure of caffeine, they're off by one molecule.
Welcome to the Woman's Doctor podcast, helping empower women to embrace their body and soul's full potential. I'm your host, Dr. Trevor Cates, and after 22 years of working with patients, I found the answers to our health struggles are much deeper than most people realize. To help explore this, I'm interviewing colleagues and other wellness experts to get to the root cause so women can realize their true beauty and be informed decision makers for themselves and their loved ones. Did you know that humans are the only mammals that purposefully delay sleep? Sleep is so nourishing for our bodies. So why do we get less sleep than other animals? Well, lights and television are a big part of that, but we've messed up our circadian rhythm and it's seriously impacting our health. So to help us get back on track, I've asked my guest, Dr. Michael Breus, also known as the Sleep Doctor, to come on the show. Dr. Breus is a double board certified clinical psychologist and clinical sleep specialist. He's author of 4 books, and the newest book, Energize, was named one of the top books of 2021 by the Today Show. He does more than 400 interviews per year, including Oprah, Dr. Oz, the doctors, New York Times, and the list goes on. Dr. Breus has been in private practice for 23 years and recently located to Los Angeles, where he was named the top sleep doctor by Reader's Digest. In today's interview, we talk about why women tend to struggle more with their sleep than men, and Dr. Breus answers questions like, do we really need 8 hours of sleep per night? Can you catch up on sleep? And do naps help? He also covers tips on lifestyle, such as timing on exercise, alcohol, and caffeine for a better night's sleep, as well as supplements that help. But don't take too much melatonin or at the wrong time. You'll find all this and more in today's episode of the Woman's Doctor podcast.
Love all the content that you're putting out. I get your newsletter every week. It's awesome. My favorite thing, I love it when you start out by saying, hey, beautiful. That makes me feel good every single time I read it.
Everyone is beautiful. I think everyone's beautiful. And so you just got to embrace your inner beauty and your exterior beauty, right?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Well, we're talking about sleep today, and this is such an important topic. I just surveyed my audience and I asked them what their number one issue was with their health. Yeah. And they said sleep, insomnia. And wow. So I just got these results. And so I'm so happy to be interviewing this because gosh, so many people struggle with sleep. And this is particularly an issue for women when you say more than men. So let's talk about that. Why is sleep more challenging for women, do you think?
So this is the ultimate question, right? This is one of those kind of controversial kind of questions. So let's break it down in a couple of different ways. So number one, let's look at the data. So when you look at the data, it turns out that there are more women who are coming to sleep specialist offices complaining of inability to fall asleep, inability to stay asleep, or waking up too early. So we do happen to see a different ratio of more women to men talking to their doctor about sleep and insomnia in particular. That's number one, which is in and of itself interesting. But number two, we also know that women have a tendency to be more vocal with their doctors, right? So we know that guys have like, I hate going to the doctor, like I'm quiet as a mouse, and you know me, I'm never quiet, right? And so like, I think guys sometimes have a tendency to think, well, if I'm not sleeping, that's macho, that's cool. If I only sleep 4 hours, it's going to be great. And I think a lot of that kind of plays into it. I also would argue that I think there's a lot of biology that people just simply aren't recognizing. I've yet to see anybody out into the literature talk about menstrual cycles and sleep on some form of a regular basis. I have female patients who the week before their period, they're so unbelievably exhausted, we have to change their bedtime to be earlier just for them to catch up on some of that sleep. And then after their period, it's the opposite for some of them. They say, I've got so much energy, Michael, I don't know what to do with myself. And, they get less sleep. And so their concern is, why am I sleeping 9 hours before my period and 6 hours after my period? Like, is that healthy? Is that good? Is that okay? Isn't everybody supposed to sleep 8 hours? And so, look, I'm here to tell you, no, it is okay. Not everybody is supposed to sleep 8 hours. Okay. 8 hours is a myth. I will tell you, though, that trying to find a consistent sleep schedule, that turns out to be a really important aspect. So whatever the amount of sleep is that you might need, and I'll divulge myself, I go to bed at midnight. I wake up at right around 6:13 every single. I know it sounds weird that I say 6:13. Okay, Trev. Like, it's weird. It's so strange. Like, I open my eyes and it's somewhere between 6:13 and 6:18 every single day. And it's like, you try to keep your eyes closed longer, than you open them up. And of course, it's right there. So I'm the sleep doctor and I only sleep 6 hours and 15 minutes. Okay. And I'm the freaking sleep doctor. So people need to recognize that sleep need is individual. Also, it's going to change over time, right? And so when we're talking about women and what's going on with their bodies over time, we're not just talking about menstrual cycles, we're also talking about potentially pregnancy and menopause, both of which have a dramatic effect on sleep, right? And so we'd be very foolish to walk in and say, oh, let's give everybody the same rules or guidelines, because it just isn't so.
Yeah, absolutely. And our hormones do play such an important role in our sleep. I mean, things like progesterone, as women are even in their 30s, 40s, those progesterone levels are dropping, and that interferes with sleep. Melatonin drops as we age, and especially for women. Yeah. And so all of these, hormonal changes play a role too.
Yeah, they do. And it's fascinating. And, when we talk about hormones, one of the things that I think is important to recognize is I wrote 2 books, one called The Power of When, and my newest one called Energize, all about looking at your chronotype or your hormone schedule, believe it or not. So if anybody out there listening or watching has ever been called an early bird or a night owl, those are what we call chronotypes. And it turns out there's 4, not 2. I discovered one of them. I didn't discover it. I just added it to the mix, just to be clear. And you can actually learn what your chronotype is. You go to chronoquiz.com. That's my website. And you can learn which one of the 4 chronotypes you are. Here's where it gets interesting is once you learn that, you actually have a hormone schedule. You know what schedule your body's going to work on. So as an example, Trevor, if you're an early bird and I'm a night owl, right? And we go on vacation together and you say, Michael, I'll meet you for breakfast, at 6:30. I'm going to be like, dude, you're crazy, right? Like, I can't even eat breakfast before 8 o'clock, right? Because my hormone schedule is off because I'm a night owl. And that's just one example of how these things can be different for folks, but it's definitely worth understanding your chronotype because it gives you kind of a guidepost.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's go ahead and dive into some tips on helping people sleep, because there are some things, of course, we've got to address root causes, right?
Yep.
So if there are hormonal imbalances, low progesterone, low melatonin, like we've got high cortisol at night, all of that plays a role, and we want to address those root causes. But there's certain lifestyle changes too that we can make to help with our sleep. And so one question to just get started with this is
right in.
I've heard, oh, I got a bad night's sleep. I didn't get enough sleep. So I'm just going to play catch up on the weekends, or I'm going to take a nap during the day. Now, those are probably 2 very different questions, but can you catch up on sleep?
This is a great question. So the answer is no, you cannot catch up on sleep. So there was a great study done almost a year ago where they gave people they put them in an experiment where they got 5 hours of sleep during the week and 8 hours of sleep on the weekend, right? So kind of catching up on the weekend, getting that additional 3 hours. They monitored 4 different things: mood, focus, attention, and memory. And they evaluated them every single Monday after they got that weekend catch-up sleep. Here's what was so fascinating. Every single week, if you looked at mood, focus, attention, and memory, they all went down every single week. But when you asked them on Monday how they felt amazing. They felt like they were at the top of their game. So there's this real inaccuracy as we become sleep deprived. We think we're doing great. I got news for everybody out there. We're not doing great. There's almost no way to catch up on sleep that you lost. Now, then you might be saying, oh, well, crap, Michael, if I can't catch up on my sleep, who cares? I might as well just not get a lot of sleep and see what happens. Another really bad idea. So what I tell people all the time is if you learn one thing from me, wake up at the same time every day, 7 days a week. If all you do is take one hint from me, it would be great if you do it based on your chronotype. That would be even more amazing, but it's okay if you don't. But whatever your normal wake up time is during the week, keep it 7 days a week. Here's the reason why, and a lot of people don't understand this. When you wake up in the morning, your eyes open up, light hits your eyeball, and specifically blue light hits your eye, sends a signal to your brain to turn off the melatonin faucet in your head. For folks out there, we've been talking a little bit about melatonin. Remember, melatonin is kind of that key that starts the engine for sleep. If you feel like you might have a melatonin deficiency, there are saliva tests that you can order online, melatonin and cortisol. You'll take 4 samples and it'll give you a great little curve and you'll know exactly what's going on. Please do not just start taking melatonin without seeing whether or not you have a deficiency, because by the way, melatonin is now sold almost exclusively in an overdosage format. The correct dose is somewhere between 0.5 and 1.5 milligrams. I can't find it in anything less than 3, 5, and 10 milligrams for most people out there. So when you're thinking about, hey, I need to get a little bit more rest, I only got 4 or 5 hours last night, what do I do? Napping actually turns out to be a great strategy that I tell people about all the time. So if it was bad night, right? You got a baby, baby's up. You got a flight the next day. You got to be on television. You got to be hanging out with Trevor Cates in the morning. You didn't sleep so well because you were nervous. What do? You can take a nap, right? And so let's talk just briefly about napping, because there's some really interesting data on napping as well. So number one, don't nap too long. I don't know about you guys, but have you ever had that situation where you take a nap, it's Sunday, you're watching golf, right? Because that's my favorite time to nap, because they talk like this. It's the best part, right? And you fall asleep and then you slept too long and you wake up and you feel like crap for the rest of the day, right? That's because you napped longer than about 25 minutes, got into a deeper stage of sleep, and it's just miserable to get out of it. In technical terms, we call that sleep inertia. That seems to be one of the things that happens for people quite a bit. So taking a nap actually can be a really good thing if it's short and sweet. Now, you might remember a while back, I created this thing that I call the Napa Latte, right? So this is where you take a cup of drip black coffee, like I've got right here. You drink the whole thing. By the way, throw a couple ice cubes in it so it doesn't hurt your throat. Then immediately close your eyes and take a nap. So the question is, Michael, how can this possibly be good? Let me roll through the science on this, because you're going to find this pretty interesting. When a cell eats a piece of glucose, something comes out in the back end. One of those things is called adenosine. Adenosine works its way through your system, goes to a very specific receptor site in your brain and accumulates. As it accumulates, you get sleepier and sleepier and sleepier. Here's the weird thing. If you look at the molecular structure of adenosine and the molecular structure of caffeine, they're off by 1 molecule. Isn't that crazy? Like the substance in your brain that makes you sleepy is 1 molecule off of this external substance that would keep you awake. In and of itself, I find that remarkable. But here's where the science kicks in. So when you fall asleep, you burn through that adenosine, the caffeine is waiting in the wings, it clicks into that receptor site, boom, you're good for 4 hours, guaranteed. Like, I mean, guaranteed. It's awesome.
Wow, that's interesting. I've never heard that before. I don't think I've heard you share that.
Oh yeah, so this is a technique that I've been sharing for a while, but I've actually got one better than that now. So I've been started working with this product called Napjitsu. I know it's a crazy name, okay? But what they do is they have time-released caffeine and nootropics like ashwagandha, L-theanine, a couple of other things. And so you take a nap, and when you wake up from the nap, you don't just have energy, but you have focus as well. I'll send you some. You'll dig it. It's pretty fun. I've been playing around with that as well. And so for folks out there who say to themselves, gosh, what's kind of going on here? Do I need a nap? You might very well need a nap. Please don't do a nap jitsu every day. You probably don't need that, or a Napa latte every day. But at the end of it all, if you need naps daily, this is a great technique that you can utilize that might replace some of the sleep that you're missing at night.
Yeah. All right. That's amazing. So what about, I'm not much of a napper, but I like to meditate.
Yeah, this is a great topic.
Yeah. So do you get the same kind of benefits?
Great question. So this is also an important question for people who wake up in the middle of the night. So remember in the beginning of our conversation, we were talking about how women have a tendency to have more insomnia than men. Well, there happens to be a more popular version of insomnia. That's the middle of the night, wake up and can't fall back asleep insomnia, okay? That seems to be the most popular type. And we definitely know that this is something that occurs for women, specifically in the middle of the night, and some strategies to think about, like, what should I be doing in the middle of the night in order to be able to kind of get myself back to sleep, as opposed to, I want to take a nap the next day because I never fell back asleep for the evening, right? And so a couple of quick strategies that people can think about. One particular metric that's important is you have to realize that in order to enter into a state of unconsciousness, you need a heart rate of 60 or below, okay? 60 or below. So that's an important factor. So when you wake up in the middle of the night, what do most people do? They say, I wonder if I have to pee. I guess I'll go pee just in case I do. This is a bad idea. Now, I want to be clear about something. If you got to pee, go pee, all right? But if you don't really have to pee, you go from a lying position to a seated position to a standing position, your heart rate's going to jack well past 60. Then if you flip on the light in the bathroom, you're even more screwed because that light hits your eyeballs and turns off that melatonin faucet in your brain. So what I'm oftentimes telling people to do is, if you don't actually have to get up in the middle of the night, it's probably okay to lie there and relax. So your question is a very interesting one, which is, well, what if I'm just lying there relaxing, not able to take a nap during the middle of the day or even in the middle of the night? Is that rejuvenative? The answer is yes. So there's now data to look at non-sleep deep rest. Okay, so this is exactly what you said. Lying in a quiescent position, like flat lying on your back, eyes closed, dark room, not a whole lot of sound going on, just to take a break from everything. We've discovered that this is actually rejuvenative. Now, I want to be clear. It's not exactly the same as sleep, right? So I figure it's maybe an hour of that is worth about 20 minutes of sleep. So number one, it's important to know that if you can't fall asleep during the day, but you can take a time out, and you can even have your coffee or your nap jitsu with that, and then come out of it 25 minutes later, you can actually still be pretty good. But there's also a way to use this in the middle of the night, okay? And so when you're in the middle of the night and you're sitting there, what I want people to remember, oh, and by the way, here's the other thing that every single person does in the middle of the night when they wake up. Look at the clock. So this is the worst habit in all of the universe to do, okay? Because you instantly do the mental math and then you say, oh shit, it's 3:30 in the morning. I got to get up at 6. Sleep, sleep, sleep. And you try to force yourself to sleep. Let's be honest. We were talking earlier, sleep is a lot like love. The less you look for it, the more it shows up, right? And it's exactly like that in the middle of the night. So when you're in the middle of the night, here's what I want people to do, because I'm probably never going to stop you from looking at the clock, but we can say, you know what? I was listening to this crazy sleep guy on Dr. Cates's podcast, and he told me about this thing called non-sleep deep rest. And so if I just chill out and relax while I'm here, and if I don't pee because I don't need to, I'm probably going to actually fall back asleep, and that's going to be a good thing. And so what it does is it lowers that anxiety, but it also lowers your heart rate to allow that natural sleep process to come back at you. The final thing I tell people in the middle of the night is try some type of deep breathing to help lower your heart rate. My favorite is 4-7-8 breathing, developed by Dr. Andrew Weil for the Navy SEALs. It's very popular. It's exactly what it says. Breathe in for a count of 4, hold for a count of 7, breathe out for a count of 8. The dumping of the carbon dioxide with the breathe out of the count of 8 actually allows you to breathe in new oxygen, which lowers your heart rate. So it actually can bring you back down to that magic 60 number that you're looking for, right? So when you wake up in the middle of the night, look at the clock. I mean, I don't want you to, but you're gonna anyway. Say, oh crap, but then say, it's all good because Dr. Cates and Dr. Breus reminded me of this non-sleep deep rest. I'm gonna do some 4-7-8 breathing, chill out, and be able to get back to bed. And it really actually works well in that way. I do want to go back to one little point that I missed earlier, talking about melatonin. So when we were talking about melatonin, we talked about when we wake up in the morning, that blue light hits our eye and turns off the melatonin faucet. Here's the thing that nobody knows. It also sets a timer in your head for when melatonin should start, approximately 14 to 16 hours later. So this is why sleeping in on the weekends is a terrible idea, right? Because when you wake up at 6 o'clock and then it sets the timer, and then you wake up at 6 o'clock and it sets the timer, but then comes Saturday morning and you wake up at 9 o'clock, it doesn't adjust the timer. It just sets it 14 to 16 hours later. which means when you sleep in on Saturday, your melatonin production is going to be later in the day on Saturday night, making it more difficult to sleep. This is why Mondays suck, okay? Because you stay up late on Friday, sleep in on Saturday, stay up late on Saturday, sleep in on Sunday, and Monday morning, all your brain wants to do is sleep.
Yeah. Yeah. Great. Awesome. So those are all amazing things to share. So let's talk about some more just general tips to help with sleep, to helping people, because there are the two things, like falling asleep at night. And then
Yeah.
what if you wake in the middle of the night?
Right. Absolutely. So I actually have a 5-step program that's super easy for people to remember, and it will help you sleep, I can assure you. So step number 1, we've kind of already talked a little bit about, which is wake up at the same time every single day, including the weekends. Do it based on your chronotype, please. I promise you it'll work even better. Step number 2 has to do with caffeine. Now, yes, I'm going to talk about caffeine. Let's be real here. It is arguably the biggest insulter of sleep that there is. You know, many people think that they can replace sleep with caffeine, and the truth of the matter is you just can't do that. Now, many people also don't know that caffeine has a half-life of between 6 and 8 hours. So for folks out there who don't know what a half-life is, this is the amount of time it takes for half of the compound to be excreted through the body. Well, here's where it gets interesting. If you stop caffeine at, let's say, 2 o'clock, 8 hours later is 10, which is roughly when most people are thinking about going to bed. So as a lower level limit, step number 2 is to stop caffeine by 2 p.m. So step number 1 is have 1 wake up time. Step number 2 is to stop caffeine by 2 p.m. Step number 3 has to do with alcohol. There's a really big difference between going to sleep and passing out, right? So we want to avoid the passing out. We want to do the going to sleep. But it turns out that the amount of alcohol and how close to lights out is what determines that effect, right? So it's quite simple, the rules, if you will, for drinking and still getting a good night's sleep. So you want to keep it to 2 drinks. So maybe let's say you're having dinner and you want to have an adult beverage with dinner, a glass of wine, cocktail, beer, what have you, right? So you would drink 1 glass. By the way, it takes the average human 1 hour to digest 1 alcoholic beverage, roughly, depending upon how big or small they are. It might take you a little bit longer because you're small. So when you look at that, then it gets real interesting real quick. So what happens is drink 1 alcoholic beverage, wait 1 hour, drink 1 glass of water. Second alcoholic beverage, second glass of water, wait 1 hour, and then you've got enough time to roughly be able to go to sleep. Now, here's the thing. Most people are like, Michael, that's 2 drinks. Exactly. Let me tell you why 2 drinks is kind of where you want to stop. Because once you get past 2 drinks, you get buzzed. And when you get buzzed, your brain spikes cortisol because it says, why is my brain toxic right now? Because that's actually what's going on with the alcohol. So now you're an energetic drunk, right? That's not good for going to bed. So that's why step number 3 is to stop alcohol roughly 3 hours before bed. This gives you the 2 to 2.5 drink with 2.5 glasses of water. You can work through that system. Step number 4 has to do with exercise. I know you're a big fan of this. If you want to do one single thing to give you great quality sleep, exercise daily. Now, let's be fair. You don't have to run a marathon, okay? 20 minutes of cardio, one way or another, is usually about what it takes. However, you don't want to exercise too close to bedtime because it will increase your core body temperature, right? Remember, we all sleep better in the cool, so we want to give ourselves some time. So step number 4 is to exercise daily, but if you can, stop 4 hours before bed. This allows your core body temperature to drop naturally and be able to fall asleep easier. Step number 5 is for morning routines. And so here's the thing about a lot of people is they don't think about sleep until 30 minutes before bed. I'm just not sure that's really the right way to go about doing it. People seem to use sleep as kind of the shock absorber of their life. You know, it's like if I'm having a really stressful day, I'm going to go to bed later. If I'm having an easy day, it doesn't really work as well that way. But having a morning routine that sets you up every morning is going to be very helpful. So there's 3 things that I do personally for my morning routine every single morning. So number 1, 15 deep breaths. So when I wake up, I swing my legs over to the side of the bed and I just kind of bring myself present, right? Just 15 nice, solid, deep breaths. I always have a glass of water by my bedside with about 15 ounces of water. You want to pop that back right then and there. Because remember, sleep in and of itself is a dehydrative event. People don't know it. You lose almost a full liter of water just from the humidity in your breath, believe it or not, from breathing all night long. And then the third step is I want you to walk outside and get 15 minutes of sunlight. Remember, light hits your eyeball, turns off that melatonin faucet. So it's a good thing to be outside. I have a little extra tip with that one is I tell people take off your shoes and put your feet on the earth. Now, I know it's called grounding and I don't have a lot of data behind it, but I can tell you that I do it most mornings and it really feels good. So I'm just going to do it because I can't imagine that it's going to hurt me to put my feet on the earth. And then the final thing that I do when I'm outside with my feet on the ground and getting my 15 minutes of sunlight is I play with my dogs. So I spend a good 5 to 10 minutes, just me and my dogs, because what's better than unconditional love every morning, right?
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. I love it. That's fantastic. And, those are very practical things that are easy to do. And I can see how they'd really make a difference. So things like lowering cortisol and helping melatonin production,
Yeah.
just helping our body reset and recalibrate, reset. Yeah, is important. So I really love all those. And I think that, what you talked about with when people wake in the middle of the night, doing the breath work, that's a really important thing. What about taking supplements in the middle of the night? I mean,
Great
in
question.
particular, be like you taking melatonin if you wake
Yep.
up.
Great question. So that is the dumbest idea in the universe, is taking melatonin in the middle of the night. Okay. And I'll tell you why. Because your brain already has plenty of melatonin on board. The only really good reason to use melatonin is, number one, if you do have a melatonin deficiency, which can occur over time. So like I just turned 54 and we're starting to see my melatonin production is going to start to go down, and it's going to start to happen a little bit earlier. You know how like your grandparents like to eat dinner at 4:30 in the afternoon? I'm starting to become one of those people. But generally speaking, you would never administer melatonin in the middle of the night because, number one, you're going to wake up and feel like crap. Having that much melatonin on board is not a great idea. What could you take in the middle of the night? That's an important and interesting question. So I actually developed a supplement that you can take in the middle of the night. It's called Middle of the Night. And you can find it over on my website. But what we do is we take about half of the normal starting ingredients, no melatonin, but half of the normal starting ingredients. So as an example, let's say that somebody out there likes to take ashwagandha or 5-HTP or magnesium or something like that before bed. I don't have a problem with any of those things. What would you do in the middle of the night? Could you take one of those in the middle of the night? You could actually take any one of those in the middle of the night because they'd help lower your heart rate, calm you down. Because remember, the only thing you're really trying to do is lower that heart rate. So do you have to have a pill to do that? Probably not. We talked a little bit about the breathing exercises that you can do, distraction techniques. To be fair, I'd almost rather you turn on the television and get bored with the TV than take something in the middle of the night, simply because adding something into the system requires it getting out of the system and all the things that can follow with it. That being said, I'm not against pills and I'm not against over-the-counters and I'm not against herbals if they're used appropriately. The very first thing I tell everybody out there is, look, do yourself a favor. Don't go to the store and buy valerian if you can't sleep. Figure out if you've got a magnesium deficiency, a vitamin D deficiency, iron deficiency, or a melatonin deficiency, because those four things are absolutely what's going to run your sleep system. And by the way, you can get tested for all of those online. You can order a kit, what have you. Look at that stuff first. Let's get the body where it's supposed to be first. Then if we needed to add something to it, I'm okay with doing that, but let's add something to it in a smart and thoughtful way.
Yeah, amazing. So you mentioned medications. What
Yes.
about how do you feel about things like Ambien?
So I have lots of patients who take Ambien and have historically taken Ambien. And I want to be very clear about something. There are some people that need a pill to sleep, period, end of story. And you know what? That's okay. That is a conversation that you and your doctor have together. And if you and your doctor have come to the point where you say, hey, I want to try trazodone, or I want to try Ambien, or I want to try Restoril, that's perfectly okay thing. There's no shame at all. This is you taking care of you, right? Now, to be fair, do you want to be stuck on Ambien for 15 years? No, probably not. Does it happen? Yeah, it does. So when you're working with your doctor, if you do want to use one of these medications, talk with your doctor about how long am I going to be on this? And can we have a taper schedule so that I can eventually come off of it and learn the appropriate behavioral methods to sleep? That's a completely appropriate thing. And in our clinic, we used to use sleepers to break the cycle of insomnia for some folks. I mean, when you've got somebody who shows up who's only sleeping 2.5 to 3 hours a night, they're in a crisis mode, right? We've got to get them stabilized and getting at least 4.5 to 5 hours of sleep before we can actually do any form of treatment. And so that's usually what happens. Now, again, do some people get left on pills for a long time? They do. And look, I don't necessarily have a huge problem with that as long as dosage isn't escalating. They're not having side effects. Like if you're using a medication the way it's prescribed, I'm not so sure that's such a bad thing, right? I kind of look at insomnia in certain ways a little bit like blood pressure, right? So you can eat right, you can exercise, you can do all the shit you're supposed to do. But if your Aunt Nellie had high blood pressure and you've got the genetics for high blood pressure, yeah, you're going to end up with high blood pressure. I think insomnia is kind of the same way, like people aren't out there jonesing for an Ambien, right? Like it has no street value, or anything like that. So I just think people need to kind of calm down, relax, talk with your doctor, see what makes sense for you, and then, move forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Well said. It's truly an integrative approach that you just, work with your doctor, customize what's best for you, start with where you are. And then, medications are really typically most of them are meant to be used temporarily, taken
Right.
temporarily, and then, you kind of work your way through it. So I think that's really well said. So Michael, thank you so much for coming on today and sharing all the sleep tips. And tell us again where we can find the quiz, more about
Sure.
your books, and any other information.
Absolutely. So I'm super easy to find on the internet. It's The Sleep Doctor, doctor's all spelled out, .com. So you can't forget that. I also own that on all the social properties. So we distribute tips and tricks, different ones on Instagram versus Facebook versus LinkedIn and all this kind of fun stuff. So check them all out. But if you want to know your chronotype, and I think that's probably one of the most valuable things that you can learn, if you go to chronoquiz.com, and we'll put that into the show notes for folks out there, I think you'll get a kick out of it. It takes about 2 minutes. And you will learn the perfect time to have a cup of coffee, the perfect time to have alcohol, when to go to bed. It's pretty impressive. And if you get the book, there's an entire chapter on the perfect time for sex.
Perfect. We need to know that too.
Everybody likes that chapter the most.
All right. Thanks again, Michael. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Trevor. It's always fun. And thanks to everybody out there. Wishing you all sweet dreams.
Thank you for listening to the Woman's Doctor podcast. If you enjoyed the podcast, be sure to share it with the women in your life. And to learn all about balancing hormones, join us for the Hormones, Health, and Harmony docuseries at thewomansdoctor.com.